I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you with us. Another big hour coming up. The big trial. Chad Daybell, the so-called doomsday prophet, facing a potential death penalty. Everything is at stake, including his legacy with his family, his 5 adult children, because he's been accused of murdering his wife, their mother. So whether or not he gets out or ends up on death row, I think for Chad Daybell, one of the most important things is trying to convince and prove to his children that he didn't murder their mother. But again, a big day. We're in the defense case. So we're getting very close to the end of this thing, because the defense case is never nearly as long as the prosecution case, because they don't have to prove anything. They're just there to try to raise reasonable doubt. So let's get right into what happened today. Joining us outside the courthouse in Boise, Idaho, Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft. Kelly, great to see you. I'm like a broken record, but every day is a big day. Today, the defense called their own forensic pathologist to the stand. This is all about the death of Tammy Daybell, right?
Absolutely. Hi there, Vinny. So day 2 of the defense case, and John Pryor hired a forensic pathologist to review the autopsy reports, the coroner reports, the scene photographs, law enforcement reports, and come up with a summary as to what her determination is of the cause of death of Tammy Daybell. Why don't we go ahead and listen to what her findings were?
You came to a conclusion in your report in regards to this case, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion?
My conclusion was that since there was no anatomical or toxicological cause of death, no injury to account for death, that it would be best classified as a cause of death as undetermined.
So, Vinny, that was her finding. The cause of death for Tammy Daybell, undetermined.
So explain to us why Dr. Raven didn't agree with asphyxia, which is what the state's expert discussed when she testified.
And that's a great question, Vinny. And one of the main things that she talked about is we are doctors, and we do not jump to conclusions. We take a look at the scientific evidence that is in front of us. And she went on to explain this in some of her testimony, talking about the few bruises that were on Tammy Daybell's arm and how they really couldn't tell you much about how Tammy died. Why don't we listen to some of this testimony about how she says, as doctors, we do not jump to conclusions.
Is it standard practice when there's no signs and there's no indication of what could have caused the death to take a jump to asphyxia? Is that what would be the common practice?
In my opinion, no. The way I practice and the way I've always taught people to practice in the institutions I've been associated with, again, we would call them undetermined. It's not. We do get cases where we don't find anything. We don't jump to conclusions or speculate. We just say these are things that might have happened. We don't know, so we're better left calling it undetermined.
And so, Vinny, that's why she said that. We don't jump to conclusions. At one time, even on the cross-examination, the state was saying, is that something that a doctor would look at? And she said, well, I am a doctor. So she wanted to remind everyone in the room that she, too, was a doctor.
Okay. Now, from the beginning of this case, I think a lot of us here at Court TV, myself included, have been talking about John Pryor. I mean, he is sharp. He is intense, he is focused, but was there a moment today where he may have slipped up just a little bit?
You know, Vinny, so this is an interesting question. So what was taking place during the direct examination of the doctor on the stand? He was asking her what her findings were. She said undetermined. She was asked, what did she take a look at in this case? And she mentioned the autopsy reports, the coroner reports, and then she based her findings on scientific data. When the state then had a chance to cross-examine her, what did the state do? The state went through a litany of reports and documents asking Dr. Raven if she looked at this, if she looked at statements statements made by Melanie Gibb, if she looked at statements made by David Warwick. Well, eventually, after a number of these questions to the doctor, in which the doctor kept responding no, John Pryor ended up objecting. And he said, I'm objecting, Your Honor, on the basis of relevance here. At first, Judge Boyce did agree with John Pryor, but then the state said, well, no, Your Honor, this is relevant because this is what Dr. Christensen, the medical examiner from the state of Utah, based his findings on. So then Judge Boyce ended up allowing this line of questioning to continue from the state. Then on redirect, John Pryor got up there and he wanted to know if these documents are all important to look at or relevant in her findings. So why don't we go ahead and listen to it, and then we can kind of talk about if we think it was a slip up or what we think. Let's listen.
Dr. Raven, Ms. Blake went over a litany of other reports and statements from other witnesses, a variety of other documents. When a forensic pathologist is examining a variety of other documents that are not related to the medical reports and the scientific evidence, is that an example of confirmation bias?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Is that an example of confirmation bias when you take into account all of these other reports, documents, statements of people who were not present at the murder?
And Vinny, so that's what we're talking about here when you heard that John Pryor saying who were not present at the murder. Now, how that really ended up resonating with the jurors is hard to say, but it's as if he was saying that Tammy Daybell then was for certain murdered. And remember, Dr. Christensen is the one that said that her cause of death was asphyxia, and then the manner of death, homicide. So he was a state witness. John Pryor's own witness is saying that it's undetermined. So when he said murder, it's as if I think he was just getting wrapped up in going with the flow about all these documents and then said that, but not sure the jurors caught it too much.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. I think it's semantics. I think we all understand that it's a murder case, it's murder charges, and you're talking about at the scene of a death where you're trying to figure out what happened here. In most cases, though, when the forensic pathologist is there, it's usually, a lot of times it is a murder scene. And it's obviously a murder scene,
True.
right? This one, the question is, was it murder? Was it not murder? I'm going to give him a total pass on that. And I hope the jury does, too, because what attorneys say is not evidence, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that. Okay. Now, John Pryor went after one of the state's key witnesses today, trying to undermine the credibility.
He certainly did. So Melanie Gibb, we've heard a lot about Melanie Gibb and David Warwick from John Pryor in this case, asking why there weren't more questions of these two people who are married, who live in separate states, who don't live in the same household, that maybe, as he indicated, just got married so that they would not be forced to testify against one another. So he talked about, there was an investigator on the stand that he called to the stand. This is an investigator from the AG's office, and he asked the AG, the investigator from the AG's office, about the interview he did with Melanie Gibb. He said it was a very long interview, and at times he said it was hard for him to understand because Melanie Gibb was talking about the light and dark scale, and she was giving some information that he was having a hard time following. He then was she eventually told him that he was light. Why don't we listen to some of his testimony?
Some of the things that she was talking about is, I call it the scale, the light or dark. She gave me the impression that she can maybe was able to determine if the person was either light or dark.
Is that something that she advised you of?
She kind of hinted at it.
Okay. And there were other options. She talked about her personal understanding of casting.
She did talk about that.
Okay. She talked about her personal understanding of being able to use vibrations as a means of healing or something to that effect.
Something to that effect, yeah.
And these were visions, excuse me. These were topics that she, in your opinion, she expressed that she had a true belief in. Is that correct?
During the interview, I believe that she believed in that.
Okay.
And so, Vinny, what John Pryor was trying to get across from this witness is that Melanie Gibb was coming up with her ideas about light and dark on her own, that she really wasn't getting these ideas from Chad, and in particular, when she told the investigator that he was light and that he had some sort of aura about him, that this was Melanie Gibb's own view. She wasn't getting it from Chad Daybell.
Fascinating dynamic, right? Melanie Gibb is the one witness in all of this that has really important information, but she was all in on this cult, this doomsday cult. Wow, fascinating stuff. When do we expect everything to wrap up here? Do we know?
Vinny, it's going by so quickly, John Pryor. So he would have called another witness today, but he didn't have him scheduled to come in today. So we're going to continue again tomorrow with more of the defense case. I don't want to say it, but it's moving pretty quickly, and I can't imagine that we're going to be going much longer.
Okay. Kelly Kreff in Boise, bringing us all the important information. Thanks so much, Kelly. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. Joining us, trial attorney, fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Ann Bremner. Also with us, trial attorney, former police lieutenant Rick King, and criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor Michael Sterling. Let me ask you this, Ann. Melanie Gibb is crucial here, right? She's an insider in this cult. You're going after her because she can determine light, dark, and all this. And
right.
But that's like Chad Daybell. Like, he's the king of all this stuff. So I understand that they're trying to separate that she's doing it on her own, not because of Chad, but they're all in this thing together.
Right, right. It's like my grandma would say, what a coinky dink, you know, what a coincidence. Who comes up with this kind of stuff? That would be Chad Daybell. So I don't know how far it gets the defense.
Rick, we're in the defense case. Defense cases generally sometimes don't exist. Sometimes they're fast. It's rare that they're long. This was a tough case, right? This is a tough one for John Pryor. There's a lot of evidence against Chad Daybell. What are your thoughts overall about how much impact the defense case can have here?
First, I want to give a little pushback to what you said earlier about defense lawyers only casting reasonable doubt. We do so much more than that. Our job is to test the strength and the veracity of the government's case. So with that being said, I think they have a difficult road, man. There's just so much evidence against him. I mean, and sometimes it's easy to lose track of the fact that there were kids buried in his backyard. I mean, it's just those facts, and his wife dying, and then 7 days later or whatever, she gets married to someone else. All those things come in, and I think when you have witnesses who are all involved in this cult-like, I don't know, these conversations where we're talking about the light and dark of people, it's hard to separate the murk from what you're really trying to get at, and give some light to the defense. So I don't know where Mr. Chad Daybell's lawyer is going to go, but I think he's going to have a very difficult time.
So did you just put the defense in the scale in the dark side, and they're not going to be able to get Michael Sterling, let me ask you this. His children testified about a lot of things, you know, that their father had been saying. But do you think the prophet, the man who wrote these books, the man who, you know, went to all these prepper conventions, the man who had followers, do you think he will get up on the stand and speak in front of the 12 who will judge him and try to get them to follow him?
That's a tough call, Vinny. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the fact that the defense is putting on a case in chief, as you pointed out, it's rare, because one of our jobs is to make sure the jury understands that we have, as criminal defense attorneys, we have to make sure there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So one of our jobs is to make sure the jury understands if there are reasons to doubt. So the fact that they've put on a case in chief in and of itself lets me know that it's unlikely that he's going to take the stand, because it's just rare that defense attorneys put on a case in chief. Just simply because our job, as you pointed out, Vinny, is to make sure the jury understands that there's a burden the state has to meet, and that burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. And if there are reasons to doubt, you have to find the person not guilty.
And Bremner, you think there's an opportunity to humanize Chad Daybell in front of this jury?
Vinny, I don't like him very much. I think I called him the Pillsbury Doughboy before I confessed to that. So I don't know. I think it's a tough one. He has convinced some people. He has got followers. Maybe he just gets one on that jury, and that might be enough.
We shall see, because things are winding down the defense case. Good news. Think Tank with us the whole hour. Up next.
How did Tammy die? Was it homicide, death at the hands of another, or something else? The defense expert on the stand today. Is this the reasonable doubt Chad Daybell needs?
This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
It's a controversial case that's divided a community.
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Prosecutors say she ran him over on purpose and left him to die in the cold.
But Reed claims that she's being framed.
It smells suspicious.
After years of legal fireworks, will the truth finally be revealed?
The end game is to figure out who killed John O'Keefe and hold these people responsible.
The killer or cover-up murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
And what Dr. Raven is going to say is that there's no indication that this is either a homicide or any other crime, and that the only conclusion she can come to is you can't determine what the cause of death was. There's no way to determine it.
Cause of death is always important, but in some cases, a murder's a murder and you're trying to figure out who's responsible for the murder. Here, the question is it a murder? Is it a homicide? How exactly did Tammy Daybell die? Well, Dr. Katherine Raven, forensic pathologist, called by the defense. So the defense hires an expert, just like the prosecution has their expert. So I first want to play for you Dr. Lisa Martin talking about Tammy's cause of death. This was the prosecution's expert.
As you went through that process, did a cause of death become apparent for Tammy Daybell?
No.
Did you find anything abnormal or anything that caught your attention in doing that internal exam?
The only thing abnormal we really found on Tammy's examination was that she had a lot of fluid in her lungs, which we call pulmonary edema. And she had a foamy fluid in her airways, so her trachea and her larger bronchi.
Did you find any explanation or anything to explain the cause of death?
Not with toxicology. When we have negative autopsies like this, so it's not an autopsy that's completely normal, but there is no cause of death that we're able to see. There's a few things that we have to consider. So we consider, seizure disorders, we consider cardiac arrhythmias, and as far as non-natural causes, we consider asphyxia. And asphyxia is a diagnosis of exclusion. And in our opinion, we did thoroughly exclude the other potential causes of death with a negative autopsy.
So it's like a process of elimination. It's not any of these things, so it's this. And that's how the state's expert came to their opinion on how Tammy Daybell died. So here's Dr. Katherine Raven today talking about that. This is the expert hired for the defense.
And there was no anatomical cause of death found at the autopsy.
Okay, and I'm gonna keep interrupting you as we go through that, because this is important. When you say there was no anatomical cause of death, what does that mean?
When we do an autopsy, we look at every organ in the body. We pull it out, we dissect it, and we're looking for anything that may have caused death. So we do a dissection of the heart, looking for heart disease. We look at the lungs, the liver, every organ, the brain, looking for natural death. anything that may have caused death. In this particular case, nothing was found. Asphyxia just really means that there's no oxygen getting to the blood to supply our organs. So several things can cause asphyxia. Asphyxia is just a mechanism. It's not really even a cause of death. It's always due to something. So it might be asphyxia due to drowning where we're not getting oxygen, asphyxia due to choking, asphyxia due to strangulation. So asphyxia in itself just means that they're not getting oxygen. It's a very nonspecific term.
Did you see any indication that there was any damage to the neck or the throat?
No, there was no obvious damage to the neck.
Dr. Christensen came to the conclusion that this was homicide, and your conclusion is different, obviously. Is that correct?
Correct. My conclusion was that since there was no anatomical or toxicological cause of death, no injury to account for death, that it would be best classified as a cause of death as undetermined.
Is it standard practice when there's no signs and there's no indication of what could have caused the death to take a jump to asphyxia? Is that what would be the common practice?
In my opinion, no. The way I practice and the way I've always taught people to practice in the institutions I've been associated with, again, we would call them undetermined. It's not, we do get cases where we don't find anything. We don't jump to conclusions or speculate. We just say these are things that might have happened. We don't know, so we're better left calling it undetermined. Other people might practice differently.
So when we have a battle of the experts like this and there's not an agreement, I like to bring in our own independent expert to break it all down. And joining me now, board certified forensic pathologist, Dr. Priya Banerjee. Dr. Banerjee, thanks for coming in tonight. Let's give me your opinion about what we heard from the two sides. Which one makes more sense to you here?
You know, I think a lot of it, when we form the cause and manner of death, that is a summation of our expert opinion. Okay, so we don't practice in the black box. You sort of have to look at everything that you have. Granted, the autopsy is negative. Did anything else seem awry? You know, we talked about this in the past, that Chad was very anxious to not have an autopsy. So I think you have to put it all into perspective. However, if it was my case and just I can only comment on my situation, I'd probably be conservative and call it undetermined cause and undetermined manner.
So you wouldn't, through the process of elimination, land on asphyxia?
Well, no, and I think this is where these cases that are in the gray zone, you know, I wish life was black and white and like TV forensics was always coming together in an hour, but it's not. And these are the cases that sort of linger with you and can obviously come to trial and have significant consequences. You know, when we think about an undetermined case, you know, what is the undetermined cause? Because that'll dictate the undetermined manner. Is it drugs? Is it a seizure or a heart arrhythmia? As far as I know, they didn't do like genetic testing of the heart. Is it drugs or is it asphyxia? So there's nothing for me to parse out these things, and I would put that in a written opinion, meaning I think homicide's still in the spectrum of possibilities, but I can't say definitively. Now, I would also mention she has these odd bruises, right? And the thinned blood. The thinned blood, we see the pulmonary edema in the airways. We see that in drugs. You can see that with head trauma, which can be ruled out at autopsy, but you can see it with asphyxia. And if you can't rule out one or the other with all the testing you have, to me that is undetermined. Now, in retrospect and in context of these two kids dying and all the other circumstances, right, that we know are going on with Mr. Daybell, does that sway you? Probably. But I think in isolation, this should be done as a case independent of all that and just looking at Tammy's records. Now, I didn't like that the defense expert did not look at her medical records. She did not rule out seizure or whatever the shaking stuff that she had. She didn't do genetics, you know, so there's other things that were limited, but that's where she was, in my mind, short-sighted. She didn't go all the way through. But again, you can still mention that these were, she could have had a seizure. She could have had drugs that we can't test for. She could have had asphyxia because she had a chest bruise from what I recall. And, you know, all of those are still sort of equally possibilities when you don't have anything to further differentiate it.
Dr. Priya Banerjee, appreciate your insight, your expertise. Well, I think that this is a case where, you know, there's 3 murder charges, and this one could be the one where there may be some level of reasonable doubt that is potentially possible here. We shall see. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you. Good night.
Up next. Did someone try to take the life of Tammy 10 days before she died? We'll break down the attempted shooting when we return.
I was getting stuff out of the back seat of my car, and suddenly he was there, and he had a paintball gun, and he was and like he was going to shoot at me. And I kept asking him what he was doing because I could tell it was a paintball thing. And then he just kept doing it, so I yelled for my husband, and then he took off running around the back of my house.
Okay, what is your name?
My name is Tammy Daybell.
10 days before Tammy Daybell died, something happened at her house. A masked man came by with a gun. Was it a rifle? Was it a paintball gun? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it's an important issue for this jury because Tammy Daybell dies 10 days later. So if there's an attempt on her life and then 10 days later she dies, I think there's some inference there that when she died 10 days later, it's a lot closer to murder than natural causes if someone was trying to kill her 10 days beforehand. Now, Chad's daughter's husband, his son-in-law, Joseph Murray, testified about this. They're next door neighbors. And it's really strange the way this whole thing went down. Take a listen.
While I was out in the woodshed chopping, I got a notification on my phone that Tammy, my mother-in-law, Tammy Daybell, had posted in the local Facebook group saying that somebody had attempted to shoot her with a paintball gun. And so I went inside to talk with my wife and asked her if she had seen the she'd seen the message as well. And she said she hadn't. She called Tammy, and I asked her to, because it was on speakerphone, I asked, did you call law enforcement? And she said no. So then I made a phone call to law enforcement at that time. I had told them that my mother-in-law was shot at by somebody with a paintball gun, and that somebody had and that the person had run off based off of what my mother-in-law had told me.
Did you talk to Officer Coulter Cannon about this being a paintball gun?
Yes.
At any time with Officer Coulter Cannon, did you mention the words high-powered rifle or scope or any of those descriptions?
No, I did not.
At a time, did you describe that Tammy Daybell saw a thing on top of the gun or the paintball gun?
Not at that time. I did not.
Okay.
So there you hear from Tammy's son-in-law as well, that she posts on Facebook about what happened. She didn't even call police. He called police first, then Tammy called afterwards. So what's going on here? What's in that Facebook post? Let's take a look at it as one of our great producers reads it.
Okay, neighbors, something really weird just happened, and I want you to know so you can watch out. I had gotten home and parked in front of our driveway. As I was getting stuff out of the back seat, a guy wearing a ski mask was suddenly standing by the back of my car with a paintball gun. He shot at me several times, although I don't think it was loaded. I yelled for Chad, and he ran off around the back of my house. I have no idea what his motive was, and he never spoke, even after I'd asked him several times what he thought he was doing. I was just about to smack him with my freezer meals from enrichment tonight when I decided to yell for Chad instead.
Let's bring back in our think tank, Ann Bremner, Rick King, Michael Sterling. Rick, she's yelling for Chad, right? That means Chad knows. Chad doesn't tell her to call 911. Chad doesn't tell her to call police. Why wouldn't Chad say, oh my goodness, someone just shot at my wife? We better call 911.
That's a good question, Vinny, and that's one that probably
I have the answer if you want it.
It's probably going to go unanswered at this point, though. I mean, she, and I guess in Chad's defense, she was like, hey, this is a paintball gun, and maybe just somebody playing a prank. And that's probably how it's going to end up unless somebody takes a stand and is able to say something different. And I don't think there was ever any, like, rounds or casings or anything like that discovered. So
no, but you know what did happen next, Michael Sterling? Take a listen to Detective K, I can't pronounce his last name, who describes Google searches made by Alex Cox, Lori's brother, the one who shot her husband, the one who likely murdered her children, what he was searching after this incident took place.
On this day was after the attempted shooting on Tammy Daybell. And the next day, he is searching if an AR functions in cold weather, how an AR functions in cold weather. Hornady one-shot shooting in cold weather. Also had a prep your AR to shoot in cold weather. He also is searching if mag rings shrink in cold weather.
Do you know what the temperature was on that day?
I believe it was 26 degrees.
Do you think that's a coincidence, Mike?
No, of course not, Vinny. I mean, generally.
Did I just call you Mike? I meant Michael. I'm sorry.
No, Mike is fine. Okay. Mike is fine, Vinny. But yeah, generally speaking, I don't believe in coincidences anyways, but that's obviously not a coincidence. I mean, the fact that, you know, this happens 10 days before Tammy Daybell's death, and he's looking up whether or not AR can fire in cold weather, right? Because you only look that up if you've got a question about it, right? Because if you got a Glock, you know it fires in anything. You can pick it out the mud, and after you've left it outside for 100 days, you can pick it out the mud, and that Glock's gonna fire. But if you've got a question about whether or not an AR is gonna fire in cold weather, that's why you're looking at that, right? So I think that it's very, very, it stretches credulity to believe that was a coincidence, Vinny.
And Bremner, I don't know if you ever bought a Ginsu knife set, but in the old commercials, there was always what? But wait, there's more. And I have more for you. Take a listen to the testimony of Alex Cox's wife.
What was her attitude and demeanor when she got that phone call?
She was very, very angry, scary angry.
Okay. And now this is the night that Tammy was shot at.
Correct.
Okay. So while she's on the phone, she appears angry and scary angry. Did you hear anything she said?
Yeah, she was using some very derogatory terms such as idiot, moron, and just being very, very angry with whoever she was on the phone with.
Okay. After she got off the phone, what did she say to you?
She said, idiot, can't do anything right by himself.
And Bremner, does it sound like Lori was speaking with her brother who had just failed in the attempt to take Tammy Daybell's life?
Oh yeah, that is bad. I just, you listen to that and it's like, coincidence? No. I mean, it's just, it all fits together. I mean, she was angry, mad, scary, mad, all of those things. What a moron. He didn't kill her. How about next time?
Rick, have I answered the question as to why Chad Daybell didn't call 911?
Yes, but Vinny, I still have the other question. Where are the casings? Because the
gun jammed. How does an AR function in the cold? The gun jammed. He was trying to fire it, and it didn't fire.
Michael Sterling said you can pull a Glock out of the mud, and you can fire it. And AR, both the AR and the Glock, rounds are coming out.
Only if you're not a, quote, idiot or moron, which I believe is the person who had the gun. Michael, it was an idiot or a moron who can't do anything right.
Well, you know, that's unfortunate, Vinny. I mean, or fortunate, depends on your perspective.
Well, it was fortunate in the meantime, but it gets back to the whole thing. This is Chad Daybell's trial.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting at, Rick, is that Chad is linked to Lori. We know that. They're together for the $144,000. They're going to lead them either in Rexburg. No, not Rexburg. No, the heat is on. We're going to go down to Hawaii to lead the 144,000. There'll be much more. I don't know if 144,000 could fit on that island, though, or can afford to be on that island.
That's the thing.
So, Rick, where do you think the jury lands on this? Because the big question for Tammy Daybell, which I think is the most important part of this trial for Chad Daybell, I don't think he has expectations of going home. I really don't.
No.
But I think he's holding out hope that this jury will not find him guilty of murdering the mother of his children.
Actually, after listening to the testimony of the forensic expert today, the pathologist today, I think, you know, hey, because the question you ask is this: do you think that she was murdered? If you only think, I think she was murdered, not guilty. She was probably murdered, not guilty. She was in all possibility, maybe she was murdered, not guilty. And so I think that you have a difficult time getting to beyond reasonable doubt with, I think she might have been murdered.
All right, we are out of time tonight. Ann Bremner, Rick King, Michael Sterling, always a pleasure to have you on the program. We'll see you again really, really soon.